What's up, party people? I'm Sunny Ray. This is the Sunny Ray Show. Thanks to our sponsors, Raz Rocket and GTM Ventures. Today, I'm joined by Kevin Lawton. Kevin, how are you today?
I'm doing well, doing well. How are you?
Yeah, I am well. Where in the world are you?
I am in New Jersey, so it's not very sunny today. So you're the sunny part of my day today, I'll say.
Ooh, I like that. I like that. I like that. Okay, so Kevin, you are okay. Before we dive into your story, which is going to be the bulk of what we talk about
Sure.
today,
Yeah.
maybe just kick us off by talking about the project you're most passionate about, what you're working on right now, what you're building. Maybe give us a couple lines at most, but then we'll put it on
Yes.
ice and then come back to it. I promise.
Okay, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. The project I'm most excited about right now is we are kind of evolving and expanding and developing this private intelligence community for the warehouse industry focused on warehouse innovation and technology. And we've been kind of quietly building that over the last 2 months and getting our kind of core foundational membership base in there. But that is something I'm super excited about because I think the industry needs it. And I'm happy to start putting it out there very soon and really kind of ramp up the membership.
Interesting. Cool. So, like I said, let's maybe go back a little bit. I'm quite interested in some of the stuff I was reading. So you started your career as a temp, was it, in the inventory department at
Yeah.
Simon and Schuster's, right, in 2012? So that's a publishing house, not exactly the first place you'd expect a future warehousing evangelist to land. What was the first day on the floor actually like? And did you have
Yes.
any idea you'd end up, making a career out of it?
Absolutely not. No, no, no. This was a situation where it's like, okay, I'm done school, need to find a job, need to get something going. And that was like the opportunity I found myself in that, and it was in the office, but attached to their main distribution center here in New Jersey. And uh, yeah, when I got in there and I saw everything that was going on and everything that was moving around, it was fascinating to me to see all the kind of orchestration that's happening and getting these books out the door to various retailers or directly to the consumers, and then all the problem solving too that needed to happen, which was kind of like my role. I was solving these problems around the inventory, um, but still was like, I don't know if this is the thing for me quite yet. But then over time, eventually, yes, evolved into that and realized, okay, I can make a career about this. And yeah, I've been in the warehousing industry kind of ever since in multiple different capacities.
Cool. So before distribution, it sounds like you were also doing a stint running a coffee house, working at PetSmart, was it? So
So yeah, yeah, in
I guess my question
college,
is, what were you chasing in those early days?
I don't know, that was a good question. I mean, what was I chasing? I knew I wanted to do something for myself at some point. Went to school for entrepreneurial studies. My mother's entrepreneur, still is an entrepreneur, and maybe that was kind of my inspiration there a little bit. But wasn't quite sure exactly like what was that thing that was going to be like my entrepreneurial journey. So I was trying a couple different things here and there. When I was in college, was running a coffee house, open mic situation on campus. Um, as you mentioned, there was called Brown Water, like coffee, right? It's brown water. That's the where the name comes from. But yeah, but then it was doing a bunch of stuff on the side too. I was doing like ghostwriting, was doing some real estate work in high school. I was organizing, throwing like local concerts and shows for local bands. So it was always kind of in me to do something, I guess, creative, and was never kind of content just doing like one thing. My mind was always going many different places, and then ultimately tried to figure out like, okay, well, how do I bring that into what my industry kind of concentration has been, is warehousing, and that's ultimately kind of how I landed on the podcast, which I do today.
Actually, talk about that a little bit. Yeah, talk a little bit about your podcast. I'm curious. And by the way, did you always have a deep voice, or did you work on that?
I have had this
I
voice
need that
since
voice.
I have had this voice since like sixth grade, right? And
Wow.
through the
Okay.
years, yeah, people were kind of like, would always make fun of it, like, oh, it's so monotone, you talk so low, and all these things, right? And then yeah, then ultimately, finally, I guess found a place for the voice, which is the podcast. I actually used to do a real estate radio show on my campus as well when I was alumni, actually, and now, put it to use through this podcast called the New Warehouse Podcast, which is about pretty much anything and everything warehousing, distribution, and fulfillment related, to the people that work out there. And my audience, I envision, is kind of me back when I started the podcast. Was very curious about like what is possible within the four walls of the warehouse, and exploring technologies and innovations to see how do we kind of take operations to the next level. That's what it's all about.
So you've described your mission as wanting to make warehousing sexy. So that's a bold framing for an industry that most people picture as rows of shelves and forklifts, right? So where did that
Sure.
conviction come from? That this world deserved a better story.
Yes. So when I started to get this idea of how do I convey more information, more education to the warehousing industry, I had a friend at the time who was working for this blog that was covering cars, right? And so they would do all these kind of, sexy video shots of the cars and the design and all that stuff. And I was kind of like, okay, well, why can't we take that approach a little differently and apply that to like what's happening in warehousing for some of the equipment and the robotics and things that are happening like that. So when I decided that I was gonna actually do this thing, I wrote this article on LinkedIn, and the title of the article was "Warehouses Are Sexy?" with a question mark. And that's kind of where that came from. And over time, like unintentionally, that just stuck, and everybody's like, "Oh, warehouses are sexy. You're the warehouses are sexy guy." And I'm like, "Yes, yeah, yeah." So we've embraced it. We got the t-shirts, as you can see behind me here, warehouses are sexy t-shirts. We own the domain warehousesAreSexy.com. You can go get a t-shirt there if you want. But yeah, that's kind of how that developed. And it's very interesting because it's kind of like, okay, well, some people are like, yeah, I totally get it. Like, I love, what happens in the warehouse, totally sexy. And then some are like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, warehouses are not sexy at all, right? So we say we have to convert them over to the believer side.
I like that. Well, and that's the beauty of the internet, right? Is you can always find like-minded individuals and connect
Yes.
with them, even if it's like 10 people or whatever. It's like, it's always nice. I mean, you're way more than 10 followers, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. So was there a specific moment on the warehouse floor, like a piece of automation, a robot, or I don't know, a problem you solved being solved that kind of flipped the switch for you and you're like, I got to make this leap?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it was in the beginning, it was a very selfish need, to be honest. Like, because I was kind of like, okay, well, I can see this being a career, the warehousing industry now, but I need to learn more about it. Like, I had no formal education around it. It was not like something I grew up with, wasn't around it, didn't really know much about it until I took that temp job that you mentioned in the beginning. And so I was kind of like, okay, well, I need to do this so I can learn more, right? Because there's nothing out there that I find is relatable or digestible for me to learn from. And I was really looking to see like, okay, well, how can I do something more at this place that I work? Grow my knowledge, grow like my network, be able to do that. And it was going to be a blog at first, but then I didn't have time to do the writing and edit. And then somebody's like, "Oh, do a podcast." I hear like this is like becoming a big thing, right? And this is like 2018, right? Started the podcast in 2019, so we're actually celebrating like 7 years this month, actually, of doing the podcast since the first episode came out. But it was kind of like, okay, I'll just sit down and talk about warehouses. Okay, that sounds like pretty easy. So that's kind of how it started, and then started to get feedback, and it started to resonate, and people were like, "Oh, this is like really good. Like, we don't have anything like this in the industry." And that kind of just like motivated to keep snowballing, keep going, and then ultimately, was able to track some advertisers, sponsors, and it's become like my full-time thing, and it's become this media company just focused on the warehousing industry specifically.
Very cool. I love that. I love that. So you've talked about the psychological barrier workers have around robots, right? The
Mm.
fear that automation means losing jobs, and then and you like how you saw companies having to actively manage that change. Like, is it something that like is it an area that you guys focus on the podcast? Is it an area that you talk a lot about? I'm just curious, like because one of my core interests on this podcast is robotics, and
Sure.
obviously one of the first places where we're seeing humanoids and robots being deployed is the warehouse. So I'm just curious, like what is that relationship like between workers and robots, and what do you think maybe we're missing there,
Yeah.
or are we all screwed?
I don't think we're all screwed. I do think, I do think there's a lot of misconceptions there. There certainly is a lot of debate over, are robots coming to take human jobs and things like that. But if you look long term, realistically, within the U.S. where I'm based, like, the statistics over time is that we're, even if like all jobs were filled and everything like that, I think there's still like a 3 million job kind of gap or something like that, right? So there's still open positions that cannot be filled, and I think as we continue to evolve and technology evolves, it's becoming less and less attractive for people to want to go and do that physical labor, right? So it's not only about, finding the labor itself, but then there's also consistency within the labor. Warehouses are notorious for incredibly high turnover of employees, and that's where this automation really sees kind of the spike in interest and ultimately development of that. And like you touched on, I think within the warehousing industry, certainly we have found that a lot of these cutting edge technologies, like you mentioned, humanoids, are finding like their actual practical applications within these distribution, fulfillment, warehousing, manufacturing environments, right? To do some of this automated work, and I think it's becoming more and more appealing to the companies because they can't get consistent labor. They can't get labor that works the same amount, steady amount. They can't get labor in the first place. In some markets, they're become incredibly competitive to do that. And just the interest level on the newer generations coming into the workforce, they're not really interested in packing boxes or being on a line or unloading boxes and palletizing them off of trailers. It's becoming less and less appealing, and that's really where these robots kind of fill that gap. So I don't think we're screwed in that sense. And I think the idea of kind of a dark or lights out warehouse where it's fully automated is way, way, way off in the distance still. I think that that is something that is incredibly difficult to achieve because there is so much variability within that. But where we're seeing like the smart applications of robotics is really addressing where, we have these jobs that are kind of very repetitive, dangerous in some sense from a lifting perspective. They're heavy, they're awkward to do, they're tiring, and people don't want to consistently do that day in and day out. And we also see, over time, because of the taxation, the taxing on the body from these jobs, that productivity slows down throughout the day, and you lose that consistency on the workflow. So in my eyes, I mean, I see there's a necessary balance to be there, but there's definitely like a lack of necessarily education or awareness on how they're addressing this, and then how companies are kind of tackling it from the labor side. Like I know from personal experience when I worked in the warehouse, we brought in a robot one time just to test, demo, see if we could do something with it. And this was, maybe 4 years ago or so. This was a while ago, and we didn't bring anything up to the employees. We didn't tell them we were doing this. We just kind of brought it in because we weren't even sure what we were doing. We were just kind of seeing like what is possible. And within 10 minutes, somebody like rode up on their forklift and they're like, "Oh, you're bringing that thing in to take my job," right? So I think that companies don't necessarily think about like what is the human factor, not only from what are we going to do with these humans after we bring in the robots, but also like how are we going to tell them what we're doing, what we're planning to do, and make them understand kind of that why within the change management aspect of this kind of digital shift within the facilities.
Yeah. So you've grown the new warehouse from a podcast into a 3PL services business, including a micro fulfillment center in Philadelphia. significant leap, right? To go from media to actually running warehouse operations.
Yes.
What pushed you to make that jump? And what has it been like to go from covering the industry to being inside it again?
Yeah, so actually, we don't have the 3PL anymore. I will say
Okay.
we did that for about 2 years. There was an opportunity actually that came my way via the podcast. We had somebody on as a guest, and then they were looking for someone to do fulfillment services for them out of Philadelphia, and that's kind of how it all came about. And I was kind of at the point where I was like, all right, I'm ready to go for this full kind of entrepreneurial journey, leave the 9 to 5 behind in the warehouse working for somebody else, and kind of create my own destiny in a sense, take a little control of that. So this opportunity came up. So we set that up, and yeah, I mean, it was a fantastic experience, certainly. But the one thing I think I missed along the way is that, like, hey, there is a real core business and something to serve in this industry from the podcast media side that is not there. So we did that for about 2 years or so. Was a lot of fun. Was very interesting to kind of control the operation versus like just managing and working for somebody else and kind of their priorities and seeing things in a little different way. And then ultimately decided to close that and then focus fully on this podcast and growing the business as a media since 2023 now. And that was definitely like the right decision. I still miss getting in the warehouse, but I get to visit a lot of them, a lot of friends that I've created through the podcast who have their own warehouses. I was just in one on Monday, actually. So when I get that itch, I got people that will help me scratch it.
Very cool. So you've interviewed hundreds of founders, CEOs, and operators on the podcast.
Mhm.
After all those conversations, what's the pattern you keep seeing in the companies that actually get automation right versus the ones that invest heavily and still struggle?
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge kind of fracture in the industry right now, I would say, between how to get it right and those that have gotten it wrong. There's some big stories out there recently too around that. But what I see is that, there's a lot of shiny object syndrome in a sense, right? There's a lot of like, oh, this is really cool. We should get this, right? But that's not necessarily the right approach. The ones that are avoiding the shiny object and really understanding what is their core problem that they're trying to solve and what is the why and the definition there of when is the right time to do that, are the ones that I see are succeeding, because there's a lot of work that needs to go into foundationally creating the operation and optimizing it to the point where it's ready for this automation and robotics. Because if your operation is, not running well in the first place, the robot or the automation solution is not like it's not a fix for that, right? Like your process needs to be solid before you automate it, or it's just going to get worse, right? It's going to go like faster, right? And the bad process going faster it's not going to get you the result you're looking for, or the ROI in any sense. So that's kind of the differences I see, where people really go about it methodically and they optimize before they get to this automation level. And they understand the why as well, right? This is like the problem we're trying to solve. We're not like walking through a large trade show and we see, oh, like this robot, we could do something with that. I think that's really cool. Like, let's get that in here and just trying to figure out where it fits, right? Defining the problem first and then finding the solution for the problem, I think, is the right approach to go with.
Cool, Kevin. This is super interesting, man. Maybe help me land the plane. What's the version of the future you're working towards 5 years from now? What does the new warehouse look like, and what does the industry look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So the new warehouse in 5 years. I've been asking myself that question too, trying to figure it out. But
I
but
know you
definitely,
have.
definitely continue to grow, continuing to serve the industry and create additional awareness and figuring out how we can cover even more of the industry and get that out there, and also be able to help people navigate through kind of these technology pivots that are happening in the industry, because I think there is such a wide spectrum of warehouse operators, some that are at the top like Amazon, Walmart, right, that have all these resources to look at technology, and then those that are at the lower end that don't necessarily have the resources to be able to do that. So that's kind of really where we're trying to focus on how do we help them and give them that awareness and education to feed that curiosity of what's possible within the four walls. And in terms of the industry in 5 years, I think we're going to see continued advancement in technology. I mean, AI is certainly ramping up within that, and the accessibility to some of these technologies, especially robotics, is getting lower and lower. So we're going to see penetration into the downward side of the market as well. And we're going to see some commoditization around that too. We're already seeing it in some robotic verticals. And then, I think also we are going to see a shift in what the entry level worker looks like for the warehouse industry. I think we're going to go from more of a material handler of today to more of like a robot supervisor, robot wrangler, exception handler in the future will be more of like that entry level position. So that's what I think 5 years from now.
I love it. Cool. Well, Kevin, I only got through like half my questions. I had so many more. This is really interesting. Definitely the most interesting conversation I've had around warehouses for sure. But no, I know robots are definitely finding their way into warehouses, and so this is very topical and top of mind. So thank you for coming on the show, and wow, we got 25 people listening in on sexy warehousing. So this is super cool. Mark, Kevin, would love to have you back on maybe in the next couple of weeks if you're free, and keep the conversation going. And and with that, I'm going to bring this one to a close. Anything else, Kevin, you want to share? Website, LinkedIn?
You can find us on all podcast platforms. Just search for the New Warehouse Podcast, and give us a subscribe, follow, and follow me on LinkedIn as well. That's the best place to get in touch.
All right. Thank you all for tuning in. Until next time. Cheers.
Thank you.
All right. Wait, hang back.